Welcome back to She Can, where we women lead by example. We interview women from all over the world to tell their stories because it's easier to be what you can see. And I'm so excited to welcome back Sherry Sidoti. Sherry, welcome. You have already told your story. We are re-recording because you have a new direction. So much has happened. You have published your award-winning memoir. And so we want to talk about all the learnings of the last years and your new direction. Sherry, so you're an award-winning author. You wrote your memoir, A Smoke and a Song, and you're also a yoga teacher, an embodiment yoga teacher. You do trauma recovery, yoga, and meditation. You do lots of different modalities. You've been in this space for decades and decades. Tell us a bit more about yourself and how you got to write your first memoir, and then we'll get into your future plans later.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It's always a pleasure to be here with you and to be with the She Can world. It's just so nice. Well, yes, you spoke it. I have been teaching yoga and meditation, healing modalities. I've been in the healing arts field for 23 years. I'm teaching spirituality, mysticism, training yoga teachers, all of the like. And I took a break from teaching during the pandemic. And during the break, I wrote a memoir. I was not necessarily planning on publishing a memoir, but it rolled, my daily writing sessions rolled into that, and found a publisher. And my memoir, A Smoke and a Song, was published in August of 2023. Yeah. And that really rolled into a whole new arena of combining the healing arts and writing, stewarding others in writing their memoir, as well as me just learning how to digest the experience of having put my story or parts of my story into the world. And the feedback, what I was receiving after doing so, really led me to kind of rethink, reimagine, and redirect my career in a whole way. And so the past year year and a half has just taken me in new directions that are really exciting at a very timely moment in my personal life and in my career. I had been kind of feeling into some sort of change that would combine the healing arts work and the trauma resilience work that I've done over a few decades, and writing our stories and sharing story. And it's morphed into this beautiful new thing that I'm doing, where I'm stewarding other writers on their memoir writing journey, and sharing stories, which you know so much about. So what a pleasure to be here.
Sherry, and I love that we get to do this again, because exactly at She Can, we interview, all day long, we interview women from all walks of life and all over the world. And every single time I see a change in the 30 minutes that we have to have this conversation about their story and what it means to take responsibility, to take stock, to recount it, and how that is a difficult thing to do, but how that is also a magical way of coming back to yourself, taking stock of what was, where you're going, what matters to you, and how you want to matter in the world. And that is something that I think is the healing magic, or must be the healing magic, in your workshops or retreats or one-on-one work, or however you do it. So tell us a little bit more about this magic that happens and the healing that happens when people start writing their memoirs, and how that is a healing modality, really, that you are now practicing.
Yes. Well, to start off, I personally, and I think many others, believe that there is an array of healing that happens not only in writing our stories, rethinking, reimagining, really remembering ourselves,
Mm.
putting ourselves back together
Mm.
in new form, how we are re-envisioning the experiences we've had. But the magic really happens in the sharing of the stories.
Yeah.
So there's the personal journey of, I think if we can be embodied, meaning we really feel grounded, we're breathing, we're connected to ourselves while we're in the practice of remembering, and then letting the memories leave our body and come out into beautiful scenes and words and poetry on the page. There's a process of transmutation that's happening in that practice
Mm.
alone. And then there's a whole other layer that happens when we go back to our stories. We read what we've wrote, we edit them, we beautify them with, delicious language and more imagination and creativity. It's like we're connecting to something higher. We're in some kind of flow. And then there's, like I said, that latter stage of once we're ready to articulate our stories and share them out loud. It really is a beautiful anecdote to loneliness. It's helping to form and co-create community. We're seeing ourselves in each other's stories, and so
Yeah.
there's less burden to carry our stories alone.
Mm.
And really, I think that it speaks to what mainly I think all people, but especially women, really feel a call to, which is to pass on the experiences that we've had so that what feels like or once felt like a wound really transmutes in that sharing process to a wisdom. A personal wound becomes a universal wisdom for all.
Yeah.
And we walk away from that sharing experience, the remembering, the writing, the revisioning, and then also the sharing experience. We walk away feeling more whole in our own stories, having processed the experiences that we've had with new understanding from where we are today. Also, spending time with the people whom we've shared those experiences with in the writing journey. So our relationships change as well.
Mm.
And then in the sharing process, we really get to be mirrors for one another. And I really feel like it's a beautiful way for us to walk away from, um, or say, I would say to walk forward in the feeling of being held in our story and holding others in their story.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an organic process. The way that I offer my writing series and workshops and classes is that we always start with a meditation or some contemplation or a grounding exercise or a community building exercise, something that helps us to land in our body, resource where we are in present time before we go back into memory, to make sure that our body is regulated and
Mm.
that we don't return into an experience and get hooked and dragged in an old story, but that we're giving ourselves an opportunity to look at it from where we are now, from the lens of life experiences that we have now, and have perspective on it, as you said, ownership of it,
Yeah.
and then vulnerability to be open enough to bring it and voice it to others, to ourselves, and then to others. It's really quite a beautiful journey. Yeah, I'm going to stop there and allow you to talk a little, but yes.
Sherry, and I love that, and I can see that, and I think that just being able to be in your body, remembering what is that feeling that I had, describing it. Your word is your wand, as you said, you beautify it. So you're reframing the experiences you had, and you're putting them into a story that is round and whole, and people come out, different, healed, more embodied, as you said, feeling less alone. Tell us a little bit more about your journey, Sherry. When you wrote your memoir, I know you had a real framework. You got up super early in the morning. You were super disciplined. You had certain hours of where it was flowing. Tell us a bit more about the writing process, and also now that you have the insight of having done it, what are the major lessons that you feel you've learned and which is now what you're passing on to others?
Yes. So, for my personal experience, I was waking up really early in the morning. I was waking up around 3 o'clock in the morning, not with an alarm. My body was just naturally, I was in, creative surge, also going through menopause. And the combination of the two, I was waking up very, very early. And years ago, probably 2 decades ago, a friend of mine had said to me, I was going through a bout of insomnia, and she said, the early mornings of the day, that 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. is considered to be the shamanic hour or the mystical time of the day,
Yeah.
where we can plug into source, whatever your definition of source is. You can even say creative flow or spiritual flow is ever present for us when other things are quiet. So it didn't surprise me that during this time that I started to put the pen to paper, that I was waking up at that time when the house was quiet and I didn't really have any distractions. And so I found it to be a very natural and easy time to wake up. I would write outside, I'd do a little grounding, a little meditation, and go into writing. And at first, the stories that wanted to, and listen for the stories that want to come up. And that's a lot of what I share in my writing courses, is that we really, if we plug into ourselves and to source, the stories that really want to be shared
Mm.
will reveal themselves to us. So we don't come at it from the intellectual perspective of what am I going to write today? We really ground and do the work to just settle into ourselves and trust that what's coming forward are the stories that in fact want to be told, at
Yeah.
least at first. And so it's almost like an expulsion. For me, it was almost like an expulsion. Had recollection of others that I had forgotten about since they happened started to surface, and those were the first stories that were written. That was my own personal journey. As I mentioned, I did not think that I was writing a book, so I was just letting those stories flow. It's a whole other process once I decided to take what I had written and formulate it into a book, and that would be like a much further stage. But at the beginning, it was really just almost a cathartic release to get it out. And then I got to take this mess, the messes from my life, but also the mess of just writing in that cathartic form, and make art from it. And I think that was the process that really, like, yes, it was healing to get it out of my body. So I no longer had to carry it, these stories, now that they were on the page. But more beautifully and more harmoniously was once they were out on the page, then I got to make art. So I got to make some kind of create something really beautiful from what once felt like ugly or challenging or difficult experiences. Not all of them. Of course, I wrote about my joys and pleasures as well, which I think is very important. You have to balance out the two. The process from taking my writing into publishing a book is a really long journey that I probably don't have time to talk about today, but every step of the way was another opportunity to learn about myself, about my experiences, also about the craft
Mm.
and the industry, as well as what I wish I had done better, right? And not better meaning written better, but better just meaning how to, even with 20 something years of healing arts practice, behind me, I still found myself dysregulated a lot of the time during my writing and publishing journey, particularly right before the book was released. It's a really scary time to be so incredibly raw and vulnerable.
Yeah.
And there was all of a sudden this connect, that this beautiful experience that I had had for 2 years or so, almost alone and with my editors and publisher, and some writing communities that I had online, that felt very safe and sacred and brave to be in these bubbles, all of a sudden was bursting, and I was going out into the world.
Yeah.
And in that practice was, I think, when really I had to hone in a lot of the skill set that I wish I had done from the beginning. And I found when I was doing my book tours and my author events that so many people in my audiences were interested in that piece, in the vulnerability piece, in the combating, the age old, who am I to write a book about my life? My life's not that interesting, those kind of self-doubt things, imposter syndrome that seems to attack most writers, especially memoir writers. And what I started to do was just listen to the questions that were being asked of me during my author events and my book talks. And what I found was a lot of people were like, I really want to write my story, or I really want to go back and look at my story, but how do I not get triggered again? How do I get myself out of places of resentment or sadness or the difficulty of my life experiences enough to write them? Some of the other questions that kept coming forward is, even if I do that, how do you possibly put yourself into the world in a way where you feel so vulnerable to share them? And why would I do that to myself? And how did you work with family members and friends, and all of these questions that I kept hearing on repeat, on repeat, on repeat. And so when I decided, I kind of followed the flow of demand, but when I decided to offer my first embodied memoir series, I really took all of the questions that people were asking me about my experience and made sure to include a more healing embodied approach to starting the memoir writing journey from the lens of it being a spiritual, sacred, embodied practice, so that by the time someone has the experience of going through the series and potentially writing their story, a lot of the fears and doubts we're already working with from the very beginning of our writing practice. And as they move through that experience, they can go more toward the healing elements of it and exit a little bit from the potential of the harming aspects that I think, even with 20 something years of healing arts behind me and devoted daily yoga and meditation practice, I still could have utilized, in my own personal experience. So it was a combination of what worked really well for my experience, as well as what I wish I had done better or known about more. Right? Yeah. Both in terms of the healing modalities and the craft of writing memoir, and fusing the two in a way that is more intentional and more directed for those who take the classes that I offer.
Yeah. And to also give people the permission, right? Because this imposter syndrome and us thinking that we're not good enough, our stories aren't interesting enough, I hear that all the time. And I always say, everybody has a story to tell. You just have to hone in on what is yours and frame it in a way where it sounds like you, and it's authentic and it's vulnerable, and you've beautified it enough for you to sit with it comfortably, to put it out into the world. So
yes, for sure. And also a lot of our story, a lot of what we're here to discover about ourselves and share with the world, we can do our best to get to from an intellectual place. Yeah. But just like healing, it happens in present time, and it's deeper than just working with the mind. And I feel that our stories and the way that we want to articulate them and the way that they want to move through the world to move out of, Stephanie's story and into everyone's story, which is what happens when we share it and when we articulate it well, is something that is a mystery even to us when we sit down to do it. And so what can assist that are practices that really help us to get out of our own way and to stop trying to bullet point or intellectualize our story and make sense of it so that, there's a takeaway and there's all of the things, and just let it move as we learned it when we were having the experience and the perspective that we have on it now.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I think is most crucial in terms of being able to feel safe enough to be in, to share our stories is to be in spaces that feel brave, where we feel excited about the risk that we're taking in sharing our stories, that the reward is actually right there in the risk. And we won't know if we edit ourselves so much from the mind. That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Sherry, so give us some top tips. What would be the 3 things that you would really tell people? If the people who are listening, they think maybe I can just start. I'll start with my morning pages. I'll get up in the morning, I'll sit down and I'll just write down what comes through. It's a first step into that direction. What would your top tips be for that?
I would say if I had to pick 3, the 3 would be that we self-regulate, auto-regulate, and co-regulate, and that we have something to do all 3. So self-regulating could be the most simple practice that allows you to kind of open the gates to the experience, tell your body, mind, spirit, I'm sitting down to write right now. Whatever comes out is safe to come out and okay. So it could be something simple like rubbing your hands together or saying a mantra, now I write, opening and closing a door, lighting a candle, something very simple that just helps us to make that switch from everyday person that we live in and the mindset of that into creative space. So that would be number 1, self-regulate. Auto-regulate takes it a little bit into our environment, like what are the circumstances present when we feel most creative and in the flow or most inspired? And can we bring some of those automatic ways that we feel calm and regulated in ourselves to our writing space? So again, it could be something really simple, looking out the window, 3 breaths outdoors, having the right music playing. It doesn't have to be this most ideal writing nook in your house. It could be something really simple, but it's about regulating in our physical space and time to say that this is sacred. This is a sacred moment right now. And whatever wants to come in is invited in with me. So I'm regulated. My space is auto-regulated or helps me to regulate just because it's inviting or there's something inspiring in there. And then the third, that you really have your body relaxes around others who help you to feel brave. So I would say find a beautiful writing community that you can work with, whether it's online or in person. And also to have kind of like a sacred contract with the people who you live with, if you live with anyone, or even to seek support outside. So you have a circle of people, even if it's not direct communication, you have a few people creating kind of a sacred circle around you as creative being and as writer. And they are there to kind of assist you in when you need support, but also to just energetically form kind of a little bubble around you that there's some kind of soul contract between you and a few other people that are supporting this writing journey for you.
Yeah.
I would say those are the 3 things that just all 3 of those things will help an individual person feel pure enough in their body to let flow move through them. and also supported enough to go through the challenges of writing your story, because I'm not going to lie, it's not always fun and easy. It can be really challenging, and you want to have the simple tricks within yourself, within your space, and within your community, small community, equally you want to be clear about what you're going to keep out, because that will be equally nourishing for the environment. So yeah. And to not worry about what you're writing or what stories you're sharing, to really allow yourself the freedom to be a bad writer and, to start and just get the words out, get it out of your body, because you'll have plenty of time, and we'll have to go over and review and edit and do all that later. But for the initial, I would even say 3 to 6 months of writing our stories, just to let it be liberated writing time that feels nourishing and supportive.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be hours and hours. 15 minutes is enough a day.
Amazing. Sherry, so tell us a little bit what the magic is of doing it in a group. We want people to read your book. It's a beautiful book. I loved reading it. I want to encourage people to sign up to your workshops. What is the magic of doing it in communion with other people trying to learn and do the same thing?
Well, so many benefits. I would say probably the richest part of it is that when we actively listen, and we allow others to share their stories with us, we see ourselves in the stories of others, and we become reflections for one another. So the word, communal or community, is that there are fewer feelings of aloneness, and we're no longer carrying our experiences alone, which is really important, because so many of us, as we move through life, how many bits and pieces of experiences are lodged in our bodies that we're trying to hold by ourselves. So in the community space, I think that is just one of the richest things that happens. Deep, deep friendship happens. It's amazing how connected we get to one another at a soul level. We may not even know what does that person do for a living? Like, we may not even know some of the normal details, the basic details about someone's life. But because we've shared some of our deepest stories, there's a deep soul connection. It becomes like soul family that that you can rely and feel supported and held by this group of people that we're meeting online. Sometimes we never meet in person. We try to, because we have writing retreats and stuff where we try to get together. But I would just say the richness and the kind of like the quality and the flavor and the taste of the connection. It's not just that we're gathering and we're in a shared space together. It's how we're gathering, and how we're using the time together is to go right there, to go deep. Like, we bring each other so close to one another. We're sharing our stories, and we're giving each other feedback on the stories, on how it relates to us, what we feel while we hear them. And this is all important information for a future writer to receive, so they know what parts of their writing style, their author's voice, the story itself is resonating for other people, what parts maybe feel like they're more just for the author to have had, but they would be taken out of the story. So we're enriching our understanding of the craft of storytelling as well. And with such supportive feedback and honest feedback for one another, toward one, in between the group, we're consciously and subconsciously understanding ourselves better as well.
Yeah.
because we're also seeing where we're repeating stories that are no longer useful to our growth. We're listening to where we're still holding grudge and resentment. You know, like there's a lot of personal reflection that's happening in the process that we couldn't have if we were just doing it in silo alone. We really need the responses and the feedback that we're getting from our comrades in the group to hear ourselves better, to see ourselves better, to understand where we're still stuck, where we still want to grow, where healing is still there for us to be had. So there's layers upon layers of benefits of doing it in a collective.
Sherry, I think you described this so beautifully. We really want to encourage everyone to check out Sherry Sidoti, her workshops. You can be anywhere in the world and do it online. There's also in-person retreats. Sherry, and I want to give a shout out to Andrea Bendewald because in her circles also that happened, and that's how we met, and that's how we are connected.
Yes.
And that is a deep connection, even though we actually have never met in person. And I'm sure we will. And that's a goal for 2025. Sherry, so what are you most proud of to date, looking back?
Ooh. Oh gosh. Specific to this or in life?
Well, it could be either. I mean, I know that
it's both and, but
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll always say this first. My biggest pride and joy is motherhood, and my son and my stepchildren. So that's number one. And the relationship that I have with my son, I feel really grateful and proud of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that it's through our relationship that I actually was encouraged or felt the call to do my own healing journey, so that I'm not passing from generation to generation the traumas that I've inherited, and also to write the book. It really was in devotion to both my son and my mother. So it was also kind of a generational familiar tie or follow through that has then also made it into this sharing these embodied memoir writing series and courses and retreats. So I think that the thing that I would say about myself that I'm most proud of is that I listen and I heed to the calling that I feel from the inside. So a lot of my direction from starting off as a yoga teacher, which came through being pregnant with my son, and that took me on my yoga and healing journey. But really from everything that I've done professionally, I think has come from feeling a need or a yearning to sort through something that was internal, and then to listen for and wait for the cues to discover that these were things that others wanted guidance on as well. And I followed that flow.
Yeah.
And so all my personal paths have also led to professional ones. And that just has come from listening to myself enough, trusting and following the call to serve others.
Sherry, and I always think when I listen to you, this is exactly what you do so beautifully in showing us, that you follow the path of least resistance. It doesn't mean it's not hard. It doesn't mean it's not challenging, but where you feel there is expansion and not contraction. And when I listen to you, that's what I feel. And that's what I think is a prime lesson for anyone to realize, that this is the gut. This is where, where am I right now? What am I feeling right now? And we have to take millions of decisions every day. Where does it feel like expansive? Doesn't mean easy, because it could be expansive going through something challenging, but there is expansion happening at the end of it, not contraction.
Yes, yes. And sometimes that requires like really acutely being able to find the distinction between following the path of least resistance in my inner world
Mm,
versus following what appears to be the path of least resistance in the outer world.
yeah,
So finding some alignment between the inner and the outer. And I think if we listen acutely, we all can discover that the inner path of least resistance comes first. And it often brings with it a whole bunch of outer resistance. But we
yeah,
have to be keen enough to stay true on that track. And then the outer world starts to align with that.
yeah,
But it doesn't always feel, like you said, like the path of least resistance, because it often does bring a lot of outer conflict with it. But
yeah,
if you stay true to it, the outer world will realign itself around it. I
yeah,
do trust that.
yeah. Beautiful.
Mhm.
Thank you for saying that. Sherry, so what are your plans and goals for 2025?
Well, I'm going to begin the year living in Mexico for a few months, which will be wonderful because that's where I'm offering my writing retreats as well as my yoga retreats, January through March. So I'm excited for that. And then also one of the reasons why I decided to stay there for several months is to start to put together some material that I've already written and maybe start to think about book number two. I'm not
Amazing.
going to claim it yet because I'm unsure. I won't really claim it until I feel that it's aligned. And right now, it's still a big wait and see that there might be more material that is needed to be lived before that happens. But I'm beginning to get the wheels turning of a potential second book. So that's exciting. And the rest, I don't know. We will see. There's not a whole lot of plans beyond March. So we'll see.
Amazing. And I would love for everyone to look on Sherry Sidoti's website, all the workshops you can attend in person and also offline, offline and online, I mean, Sherry. And so, what would you like the takeaways to be of our listeners from your story?
Gosh, I think everybody has a story to tell, no matter who you are. You have an important story that needs to be shared. That when we gather and we allow ourselves to be raw, open, vulnerable, that's when we are serving in the way that we're put on this earth to serve. Also, just a reminder that the experiences everybody has had not only are valuable, but are beautiful, even if they didn't feel that way, that they're worthy of some revisiting and some digesting, right? So that we can metabolize our experiences and consciously decide to do with them, even if we
Mhm.
don't ever write or don't ever share technically share our story, that they're still worthy of the time to metabolize. So we're not dragging them with us and then also passing them on consciously or subconsciously to all those who come into our presence, that it's a valuable experience in and of itself to care for ourselves and pull out the nourishment from our life, do the work to release the waste so we're not subconsciously harming ourselves and others when we come into contact with each other. Yeah.
Sherry, I'm
Yes.
so grateful that you have retold your story, showed us this new direction, really inspired us to think of our own story, for wanting to take ownership, figure out the inner and outer realignment of our story, the tidy up process, the inner and outer tidy up process that is a part of that, getting rid of all that waste, really being on this healing journey. I would love to encourage everyone to buy Sherry Sidoti's book, A Smoke and a Song. Check out her workshops. And thank you so much, Sherry, for so much inspiration and so many tips.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much. It's always an absolute pleasure to be with you.